next chapter. And so, good principle of interpretation would demand that the way you understand one instance of Emmanuel must be the way you understand it in the next two usages in the next chapter. And so what I'm going to do is read you the context for these two other usages of Emmanuel and demonstrate that this Emmanuel is no mere human being, but actually God with us. And so if you have your Hebrew scripture, you want to follow along?
Yeah, I'm with you.
This is from Isaiah 8, and I'm going to read from 6 to 8. Inasmuch as these people refuse the waters of Shiloah that flow softly, and rejoice in Rezin, in Remaliah's son. In other words, they were trying to make a treaty with the Rezin, who was the king of Damascus, the king of Aram. Okay, Rezin and Remaliah's son. Now therefore, behold, the Lord brings up over them the waters of the river, strong and mighty, the king of Assyria, and all his glory. He will go up over all the channels and go over all the banks. And what this is talking about is the fact that Assyria, that was threatening Israel and eventually took Israel into captivity, would also threaten Judah. And so King Ahaz made a treaty with Assyria. But Assyria thought, who needs to eat this treaty? I'm going to have my cake and eat it too. I'm going to take all Judah. And so it says that this king and his army passed over the channels and went over the banks. And he will pass through Judah. He will overflow and pass over. He will reach up to the neck, and stretching out of the wings will fill the breadth of your land. What it's talking about there is that Assyria, the nation of Assyria, will gobble up all of Judah except the neck. And the neck, of course, if you know your history, that represents Jerusalem. And remember King Hezekiah and Isaiah held up Jerusalem. And Isaiah brought out Hezekiah a prophecy, because Hezekiah and all the people came before the Lord, and they humbled themselves, they cried out to God, and God sent them an incredible rescue. That night, the angel of God went out among the Assyrian army and destroyed 185,000 of the Assyrians. When the king, Sennacherib, got up the next morning, saw his army was destroyed, he took the rest of the army and he went back to Assyria, and that was the end of the Assyrian invasion. But I want to complete that quote, because it says, he will overflow and pass over, he will reach up to the neck, and stretching out his wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Now what it's saying here is harkening back to the original usage of Emmanuel. It's saying that Emmanuel seems to be the owner of the land. Now how could a mere human being be the owner of the land? Let's look at one other context. And this is just the next verses. Starting in verse 9. Isaiah says, be shattered, O you peoples, and be broken in pieces. Give ear, all you from far countries. Gird yourselves and be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, but be broken in pieces. In other words, all these nations are going to be broken. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the word, but it will not stand. Why not? He concludes the statement by saying, for God is with us. But in Hebrew, that word is for Emmanuel. What Isaiah is saying there is, the nations have all these plans that are not going to stand, they're going to be broken. What's going to stand in the way? Emmanuel. See, this Emmanuel is not a mere human being. This Emmanuel is the one who stands against all these nations that are coming against Israel.
Thank you. If you know, in Hebrew language, there are tens of names, or perhaps hundreds of names, that the meaning of those names is God is with us, or God watch over us, or God is our source, or many other names. Nobody ever claimed that just because the word El, Emmanuel, or different El, or Daniel, or all kinds of names, because the name El is in it, so he is the Messiah or he is the master of the land. But I just want to make sure that I highlight the point that I told you before. Please, we are still speaking about the Alma, the young lady, and I would like to give you an example what I meant before, maybe to make it a little bit more clear to you. This is what I'm going to go ABC. First, the prophet was sent to the king of Ahaz before the war with those three kings, as you mentioned, Ahaz, Pakach, and Razim. The prophet Yeshayahu lived 600 years before Jesus was born, 2,600 years ago. As you know, I'm sure, 26 in the time of King Chizkiyahu, 2,600 years ago. That means 600 years before Jesus was even born, before anybody knew about him, God sent the prophet to tell the king of Israel that right now I'm going to send you a sign that you're going to win the war. And please pay attention to the details, because the way you presented it, you skip one or two things that change the entire subject. And those are the things which I like to highlight. The first example is that the daughter or the wife is pregnant, nobody knows about it yet, she will give birth to a boy. The name of that boy eventually will be called Emmanuel. This boy will eat delicious food, such as butter and honey, even though, remember, the prophecy described that in this particular moment, there were ambush around the land, starvation, there is nothing to eat, even simple basic food are not in the existence. Comes the prophet against all odds and tell him, this son that will be born will already eat like a king, even though he's still not even an infant. And before he will know to tell the difference between good and bad, the country will be redeemed from the enemies. Tell me please, what's the connection between the sign that God sends 600 years before Jesus was born, God sending a sign to the people of the land that the wife of the king or the daughter is going to have a baby, and this baby would live like a king, even though right now it's hard to believe that in 9 months the situation will change completely. That's how you know that God is serious about what he promised. Now remember, the word Alma, I insist, without any doubt, means